Hello everybody! How was your January? I know I am a bit late with this video because the first week of February is already over. I'm sorry. My last couple of weeks were a bit stressful. I'm currently in the middle of exam season. I just got back from my Chinese exam, my oral Chinese exam. And I had a couple of doctor's appointments and birthdays and all of those sorts of engagements that are slowly but surely passing at this point, but I just haven't gotten around to filming this video yet, so I'm very sorry. I hope your January was less stressful than mine, or if it was as stressful as mine, that you now get the chance to calm down a little and to just enjoy your time again. So January's over, so that means February is coming up, or well, has come up, given the date that I'm filming this. So I wanted to take you along and show you my bullet journal setup for February. I know that due to me being a bit late on this, that it might not be the best thing for you to just follow along and take inspiration from this for your own February spread, because ideally you're already done with that one. But maybe you can take some inspiration from my spreads and my themes for your March spread, if you'd like to. For this month's theme I chose the film Modern Times by Charlie Chaplin, which most of you have probably heard of either the man himself or the film, because both are fairly iconic and well known. But don't worry, if not, I am here to tell you a little bit more about it. As always, I started out with my cover page for the month. I didn't choose a quote to go along with it this time, and instead chose to move the quote to the end of the month as sort of closer and a goodbye to February. My cover page and colour scheme were again taken from a poster for the film I will be talking about in this video. I feel like the image of Chaplin riding on a giant cogwheel is fairly famous, and probably one of the first things that comes to most people's minds when talking about the film or Charlie Chaplin, next to maybe the image of him as, I don't know what, Hinkler, his parody of Adolf Hitler. I don't know. I actually think my background on this got a little too blue compared to what I was going off. But I'm kind of glad it turned out that way. That brings a little pop of colour into the whole thing. February next to November is probably the worst month of the year for me. Like, it's so grey and trist and just sad and grisly, and the weather is really rainy and cloudy, and it's not really here or there, like it's not snowy and bright and wonderful out there, it's just mush. Like grey, disgusting mush that seeps into everything and like that takes hold of every single bone in your body. And I just feel perpetually tired and like frozen to the bone, really. On the other hand, you know that spring is right around the corner, so every bone in my body will start itching by the pure thought of it, and I'm really looking forward to it. So, given the whole greyness and sadness really of February, I'm kind of glad I went a little bit overboard with the colour, because that makes it a little bit happier and nicer to look at, I feel like. I chose gold as my contrast colour to imitate the autograph of Chaplin that he put on the poster as well. You can actually see me trying out yellow at first on the next page, the calendar spread, but I ended up not really liking it and it didn't show up that well on the blue, so I went back and forth with different colours until I settled on gold and decided that that's the way I liked it. And my golden marker actually went empty halfway through the setup, which is why you see me switching to a different pen later on. You know, the struggle is real and all. I know it breaks the theme a little, but I added a couple of stickers to highlight special events this February, like hearts for Valentine's Day and little pandas for Chinese New Year. I've seen so many cute Lunar New Year. spreads out there, but I was already set on a theme, so I didn't want to change that again, because like switching to a Chinese Lunar New Year theme would kind of not fit with my whole film theme thing. I still wanted to honour the tradition anyway, since I've started learning Mandarin this semester as well, and I kind of want to learn more about Chinese culture and Taiwanese culture and, you know, all of that. I originally wanted to add little tiger since it's the year of the tiger, but I don't have tiger stickers, so I settled for the panda instead, which is so much cuter, I'm sorry, a hill I'm willing to die on, but it's also the national animal of China. Also, little fun fact, panda in Mandarin means 小马, and I really hope I read that correctly. I wrote the pinyin down, and I hope that worked. Which translates to, I think, bear cat or something like that, which I think is adorable and very fitting. As always, I will fill out more personal information later off camera. Thank you for understanding again. Most people probably know Chaplin from one of his later films called The Great Dictator, in which he satirizes and parodies German dictator Adolf Hitler with his character of Adenoid Hinkle. The film came out in 1940 actually, amidst the rise of fascism in not only Germany but kind of all of Europe, you know, Italy as well, for example, and caused some controversy. In fact, filming began only 6 days after Britain had declared war on Germany. Chaplin was of the opinion that Hitler must be laughed at, that is a direct quote, since ridiculing him would take away some of his power. And still he ended the film on a sincere note, dropping all acts and addressing the audience directly in a speech against both fascism and war. Though lauded by President Roosevelt, who got to see the film before publication, the film also caused some controversy amongst viewers. Due to his own background, more on that later, Chaplin had often been outspoken against the circumstances many poor workers had faced during this time, which often enough had him accused of communist sympathies, and led to him leaving the US after an FBI investigation. Chaplin then spent the rest of his life in Switzerland. I continued my setup with my rounded habit trackers as well as adding a mood tracker. I found a similar layout for the combination of both spreads and a video by Looting Studios, and I thought I'd give it a try. The rounded trackers actually ended up working really well for me last month, so yeah, I just used them again. I think I sometimes forgot to add some colour once in a while, but apart from that, that worked out really well and a lot better than traditional habit trackers for me. This month I actually added a couple more habits that I wanted to track. I also adjusted some of the previous months. For example, I noticed that 1,000 words a day were just way too much for me, so I went down a little. I also noticed that I've been forgetting my meds recently, so they got their own little tracker because that's kind of important. I tried a more simplified mood tracker than the ones I used before. Don't get me wrong, I really love beautifully coloured mood tables, but they don't work for me. I just add too many categories, or I just get confused by my design, or all of those issues really. So this time I used these cute little motion stencils to add trackers for happy, sad, depressed, tired, angry and anxious. I'll have to see if these aren't too many categories again, and if this works for me, but I feel like I shouldn't just track my mood, but my mental health and certain symptoms as well, so this is where I ended up. I will just cross off each day according to how I felt. Next to Adenoid Hinkle, the Trump is probably Chaplin's most famous role. He adopted the persona of a working-class, well-meaning yet fumbling fool for most of his early films. He later dropped it, though, and just went for different roles instead. The Tramp is, however, the main character of Modern Times, the film that inspired this spread. Struggling with modern-day life and trying to achieve his own American dream, the Tramp is hopping from job to job while messing up each new endeavour he tries. So it isn't really surprising to me that the aforementioned critiques of capitalism and the treatment of workers can also be found within the narrative of Modern Times. Next setup is also fairly self-explanatory. And those of you who have watched my previous video may already be familiar with it. I am trying to track things I watch, read and play a little more, so I always add a media journal spread to my monthly setup. At the beginning of the film, the tramp works in a factory, like a lot of people did during these times. He is, however, fed up by the repetitive work and tends to mess up even the most menial tasks. I am familiar. No, not that far. I am familiar. The factory sequence is also probably what is most well known to casual film buffs and is where the cogwheel image stems from. And I truly love it, to be honest. Not only is it hilariously funny even to this day, it is also very confrontational about what is wrong with working conditions and the modern times that both Chaplin back in the day lived in and that I find myself in today. And, well, what is wrong with capitalism? The workers rarely get any breaks, and even if they do, they're meticulously planned and timed. The tramp's employment here, like any following gigs, is however cut short due to a mental breakdown this time. Released from the hospital, he then gets mistakenly arrested at a communist demonstration which he mistakenly stumbled upon, and then in prison he just smuggled cocaine, stumbling into a jailbreak while high on drugs and mistakenly knocking a fellow prisoner unconscious during his try to escape. And, you know, for once things seem to be going well for him. Our hero, he gets released, only to get arrested again and again for all sorts of coincidences. After the media journal, I added my expenses and income spread. I noticed that one page was not enough for expenses last month, and I had to adjust my spread a little. So this time I decided to be prepared and change my second page layout a little bit. In fact, Chaplin's early life had not been too different from his characters. Growing up in poverty in the London of the late 1800s, he had an absentee father, been sent to the workhouse several times, and a mother who got committed to a mental health facility while Chaplin was still a child. And yes, that does sound exactly like the narrative from a Dickens novel. It is not, though. It was real life. To feed himself and his family, Chaplin began performing at a young age, first in travelling shows and theatres and later on in film, when his career as a vaudevillian, I love that word, led him to being signed by American film studio Keystone Films. After all the important monthly setups were done, I moved on to the weeklies. As always, I included day-by-day breakdown of my week, as well as my rolling weekly for non-deadline bound tasks. I added a couple of adjustments, however, to keep track of both my fluid intake as well as my sleep cycle, which has been slacking recently. I use a section of each daily tab to track exactly that. This is to get at least 8 hours of sleep a day and drink at least 8 glasses of water. To keep up with the honouring of Chinese New Year and to get some Mandarin practice in, actually, I also decided to add the Chinese writing for each day to each tab. My written Mandarin exam was on the 3rd of February, so some Hanzi practice couldn't really hurt, no could it? I also later added a little task I got from my therapist this week. It took me around 2 days to set up this journal, so I had a therapy session in between and spontaneously decided to add it. A new weekly spread I added was a double page for meal planning and grocery shopping lists for each week. The meal planner was inspired by a video by Jashi Korin that are linked down below. I also really enjoy cooking, but I've noticed myself ordering out more and more throughout the pandemic. So I wanted to create more motivation for me to cook and discover new recipes. I'll add a category for each meal as well as a snack each day and sit down beforehand to plan out what I want to cook and what I'll need to buy and so on. I also added a little section where I could track how hungry I was feeling before, how full I felt after, and to leave some notes to prevent overeating and keep track of what I liked and didn't like. I'll also note down any recipes I find that I would like to try in the future. I feel like I should mention that Hollywood as we know it today wasn't necessarily a thing back in Chaplin's times. In the early 20th century, film producers started moving to California, USA. Before that, film was mainly an independent endeavour and not as glamorized as it was today. In fact, being a film star, or starring in a film, which is I think where that word actually comes from, wasn't really a thing in the early days. Being an actor in a film carried shame and was something you'd do in secret to earn a little extra cash. Filmmakers moved to California for several different reasons. First off, patents to equipment were mainly held by Thomas Edison's company, so independents using it were usually fined and barred from using it further on. These patent lawsuits were easier to avoid in California since Edison's company had their main sort of branch in a different state. The state also offered excellent weather conditions all year round and different terrains and habitats to film in. Like half the desert. You could easily film on some astroturf. There was the ocean. By the 1930s, the whole system became a well-oiled machine that could crank out hundreds of films a year, with the film market being controlled by 5 big studios: Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, Paramount, Warner Brothers, RKO, and Fox, and 3 smaller ones: Universal, Columbia, and United Artists. Most of these still actually exist. These companies had stocks in their own theatres as well as a production and distribution venues and created today's star system and cult. I set up my anxiety kit, a spread you may also be familiar with. If you watched my January video, the idea is to set up different activities I can do whenever I feel anxious or depressed and might need something to calm me down or cheer me up. These activities can vary and can generally be whatever you want them to be, really. I usually try to mix them up a little and have a good balance between things that I can easily do anywhere I go, or that are bound to being at home or to being at a certain place. I also added 2 new spreads again, inspired by Jeshi Korin. I wanted to walk and move more this month, so I set myself a 5,000 step minimum for the month. Whenever I hit that limit, I'll fill out a little box in my spread. The goal is to get 5,000 steps each day. I'm starting with a lower number, trying to slowly max up throughout the months, so if I notice this spread working well for me, I'll limit it to maybe 7,000 next month and go further up, and so on, and so on. I also added a little self-care bingo. Whenever I do one of the activities written within one chamber, I cross it off. The goal would be to have 3 in a row, but I am hoping to fill out as many as possible. However, interesting to note that even though he was active all throughout the years of the studio system forming and after its establishment, Charlie Chaplin kept a lot of his freedom and creative control over his own movies. He even founded his own production company in 1919, under which he also created Modern Times and The Great Dictator. As I already mentioned, Chaplin became increasingly political, which then led to him leaving the US, unofficially exiled. The next spread I added was a little memory gallery. I got the idea from a video by Tina's Diary. I split the page into 28 little departments. The idea is to write or draw one little thing for each day. Something small, something big. Really, whatever you did that day and what you'd like to remember. Having communist sympathies, this is so American to me. I'm sorry, as a non-American, this is just so ridiculous to me. But having communist sympathies wasn't Chaplin's only scandal throughout the years. He married often, and usually his spouses were a lot younger than him, which admittedly is kind of shady. Because they also were a lot of actresses he was working with, so there's like this power imbalance. He also had an affair with actress Joan Barry, which ended in a paternity suit and Chaplin paying child support until the child's 21st birthday though, and that is the interesting part, blood tests actually revealed that she was not his daughter. J. Edgar Hoover, yes, the infamous FBI director, used this controversy, however, to drum up more discontent towards Chaplin, accusing him, amongst many things, of human trafficking and white slavery. He had transported Barry across borders for a film and then began a relationship with her. All of this under the violation of the so-called Mann Act. Fun fact, this is also the same law that Ghislaine Maxwell stood trial for. Other than Maxwell though, Chaplin was acquitted, but his reputation still took irreparable damage. Shortly after his paternity trial, a 54-year-old Chaplin married 18-year-old Una O'Neill. The two lived together until Chaplin died and had several children together. They were very content together, at least from what they told others and what others told people about the couple, even though there was a huge age difference between them. I then finished off my monthly setup with the regular monthly stats, as well as a quote by Chaplin reading, "A day without laughter is a day wasted." So I hope February will hold many days of laughter for you all, so that you may not waste any. I still have some stressful things ahead of me, but I will be finally able to relax by the end of February. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please leave your comments down below, and feel free to visit me on my other social medias. Oh, and I'd love to see your setups for this month. Really, I do. As before, I will leave a list of my stationery in the description box. I'm not paid to advertise any of this, I just like sharing it. Lots of love.